We're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program. Yeah, you just got to understand. You got to get a playbook, and then you'll understand the way it's actually working. Here is a supercut of J.D. Vance explaining what the situation really is.
At war with Iran, we're at war with Iran's nuclear program. And it was only when the president decided that the Iranians were not negotiating in good faith that he took this action. Yeah. He didn't take it lightly, but I actually think it provides an opportunity to reset this relationship, reset these negotiations. The Iranians are clearly not very good at war. Perhaps they should follow President Trump's lead and give peace a chance. If they're serious about it, I guarantee you the president of the United States is too. I certainly empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is that back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives. So this is not going to be some long, drawn-out thing. We've got in, we've done the job of setting their nuclear program back.
Well, we don't really know whether it'll be a long, drawn-out thing or not, do we, J.D. Vance? In fact, at this hour, the Iranians have done what they have to do. I mean, they can't just sit there and take it and go, okay, now we're going to go back to diplomacy. No. I mean, think about it. Politically, practically, it just doesn't make any sense. You must call out this violation, which they've done, call it out as a violation. Look, I'm an American. I'm on the American side. You know, I'm on Team America, but I'm also trying to call it objectively. And I'm just saying, as a practical matter, the Iranians have no choice but to hit back. Now, we can calculate whether or not that hit back will have a ripple effect that will extend months and years. I'd suggest it will. And I can give you all of the math on that and will in the hours and days to come. But in the short term, they're definitely going to strike back with what they've just done in the last half hour. Here it is.
I want to bring in our chief foreign affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz. Martha, you've spent a lot of time in this region. What do you make of this announcement now from the Qataris saying that they successfully intercepted this attack? And what does that mean for future retaliation?
Back to what President Trump has said in the past. He has very much said that the U.S. would respond with strength. And the U.S. and Donald Trump are certainly in a position where they would have to follow through with that threat as well.
So with the base, the American base really not having suffered any, I don't, Kim, based on what I'm seeing and, you know, early reports, it doesn't look like there was any real damage done, does it? I mean,
and would this be it? You know, a tit for tat?
No, it would not. That's no. By the way, that's not tit for tat. I mean, that's you know, we just
went into their country,
annihilated right, the Iran nuclear. I don't want to say the Iran nuclear facility, because the Iran nuclear facility, and this is the next thing, or one of the things I wanted to get to. The Iran nuclear facility was built underground, specifically to avoid the bunker buster bomb that's talked about. They're aware of the munitions that the Americans have, and they built a structure that was literally designed specifically to withstand the attack that we saw over the weekend. So you can have a parade and you can peacock all you want about what you've done and about how it was a successful mission. I get the fact that it was a successful mission from the standpoint of this marathon flight that has to be taken by these heroic pilots, and I will call them heroic pilots. I think they fly the missions that they're called upon to fly, and they successfully executed the mission. But you can't tell me that the mission was successful because you don't know. And
well, Trump says Trump says that it was obliterated. All the underground things were obliterated.
Yeah.
That the Iran's nuclear program is obliterated. The military is still trying to figure out if that's true.
I've never seen anything like the kind of obliteration that we.
I've never seen anything like it.
All right. So can we now get to? Give me a little Caroline Leavitt, Tony. She was on Fox and Friends, and she's doing the peacocking that we're hearing from this administration right now. It was such a successful mission. Wow, this president has the courage to do something that no other president, a version of what J.D. Vance said when he said all the other presidents before him have been dumb. Finally, we have a president who is smart enough to understand the threat and to go for it. He literally said, all the other presidents before Trump were dumb. He used the word dumb. I mean, just it was the entire message around this thing is so much like a blunt instrument that there's just it can't possibly all be true to the extreme that they've described. Now, again, there's nuance to the Middle East, and we'll get into some of that, but there's no nuance to the message coming out of the White House. Go ahead, Tony.
A Fox News alert, President Trump gathering his National Security Council at the White House today as he doubles down on his campaign promise, making the world a safer place after the epic takedown of Iran's major nuclear sites. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt joins us now. Caroline, I know the president seems very pleased by the results so far. What do we know about the effectiveness of the attack that's been relayed to you?
Mm-hmm. The president is pleased, the country is pleased, and frankly, Brian, the whole world should be pleased with the courageous action that President Trump and our United States military took on Saturday night. I want to thank, and the president wants to thank, the brave pilots who flew nearly 40 hours and more than 7,000 miles from the middle of America to the Middle East to conduct this highly successful and complex precision strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. This is an operation that presidents of the past have dreamed about, but no president had the guts to actually do it. But President Trump did, to take away this imminent threat, not just to the state of Israel, but to the United States and the rest of the world. So the country is a safer place today because of the president's bold action, and he has prevented a nuclear conflict. He has prevented a rogue radical regime from obtaining a nuclear bomb and threatening our people.
So I know the president's very decisive, but he also likes listening to all angles. And he's used to Democrats fighting against him. How much harder was the decision when you have people like Steve Bannon coming over for lunch saying don't do it, Marjorie Taylor Greene saying don't do it, and other voices like that? How did the president digest all that, knowing these people weren't necessarily against him, they're against pending action he more than likely was going to take?
One of the great things that makes President Trump a great leader is his ability to listen to people with different perspectives, but then ultimately make a decision based on his own instinct and the intelligence that he saw. And he saw, based on U.S. intelligence, that Iran is just weeks away from obtaining a nuclear weapon. And President Trump has been saying his entire life, not just as a presidential candidate or as president of the United States twice, but also as a private citizen, that Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon. And that's something that leaders around this world and on both sides of the political aisle agree with. Again,
okay, let's just stop for a second. I just want to mention, because she invoked the mention of the intelligence community and the American intelligence community, she was talking about the fact that the American intelligence community was saying unequivocally that they were 2 weeks away from having a bomb. It's always 2 weeks with everything. Mm-hmm. But that isn't actually what the American intelligence community was saying, is it? In fact, Tulsi Gabbard was saying there's no evidence that they are close to a bomb. It's clear that after Trump heard that Tulsi Gabbard fell in line and she recanted that in effect. And Trump, said, I just don't believe her. In the same way he didn't believe that the Russians were involved in the election of 2016. The pushback, though, on the intelligence that was coming out of the American administration was profound. And I don't like that question, like, how did this is a propaganda machine, Fox and Friends. How did the president handle the fact that Steve Bannon was speaking with him and Marjorie Taylor Greene, they seem to oppose this? How did he handle it? I mean, come on. We saw how he handled it. But what I like about that question is it references a real thing, which is something we talked about last week, which is a split in MAGA land. Mm-hmm. There are those who very much view this as a violation of a promise you made, Mr. President. You promised we wouldn't get into any more of these things. In fact, you said we were going to get out of the things that we were already in. Instead, you're going in heavy. And you're even shining on American intelligence in the form of that which Tulsi Gabbard articulated, which shows that they are not that close to building a weapon. Now, see my first point, even if they were building a weapon, they're doing it well beneath the surface of where those bombs landed. And I understand those bombs can be immensely destructive, but and maybe they did destroy the entire thing. We don't know. There's a centrifuge down there. There's a bunch of uranium that they are trying to enrich. We did have modest inspections of the Iranian nuclear program, and we had more than modest inspections of the Iran nuclear program under the deal that Obama crafted. I mean, that wasn't a perfect deal, but that wasn't a bad deal. And you had a real-time monitoring of what the Iranians were doing. In fact, you were able, under that agreement, this is the one that Obama made, you were able to jump in, kind of with like a pop quiz kind of sense of what's going on with the Iranian nuclear program without warning. You were allowed to show up with inspectors. That was the agreement that Trump tore up because it had Obama's name on it. Now, as he tried to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, as I say, and you sort of put that agreement that you've ripped up back into place, while he's at the negotiating table, he bombs the entire place. Now, the articulated vision that accompanies that bombing out of the administration, you've heard J.D. Vance say this, you've heard others, is now we've shown you we don't have the patience for your BS, Iran. We want to get you back to the table to make an agreement now. It's an aggressive kind of diplomacy, right? And the Iranians have the view, at least so they've talked about, essentially their position being, how can we trust the Americans? They're negotiating with us one day and they're bombing us the next. They tell us we have 2 weeks while the president considers what to do, and then the next day, America sends bombers over. I mean, this, again, is the Iranian position. So there will be Iran retaliation. There was Iran retaliation earlier today, as we say, just in the last hour on our base in Qatar. But beyond that, there'll be more. In fact, there's a lot of talk about these sleeper cells that are everywhere. I mean, again, you have to understand that the anxiety has been ratcheted up. And the latest on the sleeper cells is associated with a threat from the Iranians. This from U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The threat of sleeper cells in the U.S. has, quote, never been higher. It was a memo sent by the CBP Commissioner Rodney Scott. Quote, thousands of Iranian nationals have been documented entering the United States illegally, and countless more were likely in the known and unknown gotaways, as they call them, people who they wanted and people who obviously they couldn't keep track of. Though we have not received any specific credible threats to share with you all, the threat of sleeper cells or sympathizers acting on their own or at the behest of Iran has never been higher. This again, according to this official memo, which urged personnel to remain, quote, vigilant. That's the sleeper cell situation. I think a bigger, more immediate threat, in addition to the bombings, which, I get it, that's performative on some level, and it's also something you have to do if you're Iran, as I was saying, right? You can't just let the Americans get away with this. And Iran leadership, has been taken out militarily. The Israelis took out a lot. This is another conversation. I'd love to have it in just a minute, which is about intelligence, because American intelligence in the region is nothing compared to the Israeli intelligence. It's remarkable what the Israelis have done from an intelligence perspective. I'm leaving aside policy. I'm leaving aside everything that's going on militarily. But what the elimination of Iran's top military leadership does is it shows you how good the Israeli intelligence is on a granular level to know the location of those military leaders so you're able to take them out. I mean, that's not something you can Google. You need the real operational strength that Israel has. So when we look at American intelligence, you keep hearing about American intelligence says this, American intelligence says that. I think Trump is working off Israeli intelligence, which is probably pretty good in terms of intelligence. I'm not sure that Israeli policy, in terms of pulling America into this thing, is anything but awful for the region and for the world. But the more immediate pushback that I think is quite possible is the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, the Strait of Hormuz is this very narrow part of this region, and it's between Iran and Oman. I think we have a
heavy ship traffic there, right?
Oh, 20% of the world's oil goes through there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think the strait itself is like, I want to say it's 21 miles, but the actual navigable part where you can actually work a huge tanker through, it's 2 miles wide. So it's very, very susceptible to the kind of interdiction that there might be with the Iranians. And so when it comes to China, and China is a huge customer for Iranian oil, a lot of their oil comes through that Strait of Hormuz. So again, this isn't a one-off that doesn't affect the rest of the world. Iran's most crucial oil customer may be affected by shutting down the strait. Marco Rubio knows this. He made this point. He said, I'm encouraging the Chinese government in Beijing to tell Iran not to close the strait.
Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz?
Yeah. I mean, they're right there. Yeah. I mean, they're right there. They can bomb, they can do any number of things to block that water, mine it. If you look at the history of this strait, there have been all these things that have been done: bombing, mining, blockades. So, again, the largest crude oil tankers come through this strait, and because the depth of the strait is such, you can get these huge tankers through, and that's not possible in a lot of other places. It's not like there are a lot of other alternatives or plan B options. So,
I was reading that there's a thought this could affect the whole global economy.
Oh, most certainly. And again, I just because I just want to be clear about this. More than 80% of the oil and natural gas that is headed to Asia comes through the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, so that's a lot of energy that Asia is depending on that's very much affected by what goes on there. This is the volume of petroleum transported through the strait in millions of barrels per day. That may not mean a lot to everybody, but essentially I think the thing you need to keep in mind is that it's a tremendous piece of leverage that the Iranians may have and they may use. And Iranian leadership, as I say, the top dude, if I can call him that, is 84 years old, and he's seeing his country and his policies in ruins. Right? This is a country, and this is a fair point to make about Iran. This is a country that has been funding terrorism worldwide. They have surrogates in the region that are dangerous, that are bad actors, if you will, to use the phrase. You have the Houthis in Yemen, you had Hezbollah, you had Syria. These were all Iranian surrogates. So don't get me wrong, Iran bad in terms of their policy of underwriting terrorism. So a lot of that is in ruins. You've seen the degradation of Hezbollah, right? They're degraded to the point that they aren't necessarily even relevant in the conversation any longer. Syria has totally changed over. Assad is out, right? And even the Houthis have been weakened, although they're still there in Yemen. And so my point is simply that if you're the Iranian leader, you're looking around and you're saying, gosh, now the Americans have just set back our nuclear program. Maybe. We don't know that that's true. But in any case, he has less and less to lose. And that's something that we should keep in mind, because I think desperation produces any number of actions that could be very dangerous to the rest of the world. Senator Mark Kelly, who was on one of the Sunday shows, and Mark Kelly is a heroic guy, all right? Mark Kelly went into space as an astronaut, and Mark Kelly is a distinguished person of public service.
Wasn't
And
he
Mark-
a fighter pilot? Didn't he serve in the military as well?
I'm pretty sure that he was an aviator in the military. I don't know if he was a fighter pilot or not. If you say he is, then I wouldn't dare challenge you.
I don't know. I'll look it up.
This is Mark Kelly yesterday on the Sunday Show.
A veteran, you're no stranger to the theater of combat. What is your message to the some 40,000 U.S. troops who are stationed in the Middle East, who are right now on heightened alert as Iran warns about a potential counterattack?
Well, I find it interesting that the person without combat experience is often the first person to want to drop a bomb. And that's what we see here. And what we did last night puts those troops, 40,000 of them, at further risk. But we are going to do everything we can to protect them. And we've got a very capable military. We're going to do our best to defend our interests.
Yeah.
Mark Kelly flew 39 combat missions during Operation Desert Storm before being selected as, and was a naval aviator before being selected as NASA's space shuttle pilot in '96.
It's wild always to think that these guys who are the chief executives, I mean, the Donald Trumps of the world, make these momentous decisions that put us into a war, an armed conflict that they would actively avoid if they were citizens. And we know that because of the record. Trump actively avoided service of any kind. I mean, I want to say giving Trump the benefit of the doubt when I say, and I've said it before, look, a lot of people were trying to get out of service to Vietnam. It was known to be an awful policy, a horrible thing for everyone, for the Vietnamese, for the Americans. Almost 60,000 lost their lives from this country in combat. Many more lives ruined. Vietnam, it's a disgusting, grotesque perversion of any kind of policy that you would have American troops over there. So everybody knew that. And Trump, like everybody else who had money and was of privilege, got out of it or tried to get out of it. I shouldn't say everybody else. John Kerry went over there. He's from a wealthy family. John Kerry was a legit war hero. And they did that swift boat thing on him, if you don't know. I mean, they essentially, I think most of you are aware, they initiated a campaign, a publicity campaign against him. And they took this legit war hero who went to Vietnam, who could have gotten out of it just the way Trump did, or just the way George Bush did. And in a presidential contest with George Bush, made somehow, and this is the magic of PR, I guess, and of a brilliant, diabolically brilliant campaign, made John Kerry, this guy who legit, person of privilege, went to Vietnam, actually served in the theater with bullets flying past him. They made him seem like he was somehow less deserving of credit for military service than George Bush, who barely showed up to the reserve post that he occupied. I think he was a Texas aviation, something to do with the Texas Rangers, barely there. Anyway, the point is, Trump, I used to say, everybody was trying to get out of Vietnam, and he did too. But there were other ways to do it. You could have you could have endeavored in some public service way to have still been part of the American military in a way that you would have been protected from being sent to Vietnam, but you would have gotten credit for being in the military and honoring your service obligation. That was not what Trump did. So, cut to Mark Kelly's remarks. Isn't it interesting that this guy is ready to pull the trigger? You know, this guy who's supposedly a peace candidate. Who told you? And by the way, I'm sure you already knew it, but I said it also, and I said it loudly and over and over and over again. The no wars president, everybody says they're a no war president. Everybody. Nixon said, I'm going to end the war in Vietnam. Nobody says, I'll tell you what, we got to get over there, got to put our boys on Marine aircraft and get them over. No one says that. They said, we got to get our boys home. That was the message since the beginning of time. So when Trump said it, you just knew it wasn't true. I mean, it was alongside everything else. I'm going to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. Anyway, I don't mean to make it about Trump, but just in general, you have people who have no experience in this area determining policy. Stan Pollock, CPA, my favorite CPA, says, I'm disappointed in you and most Democrats. The world is safer today. Nobody disputes that, but because it was Trump, everyone says this is bad. Let me respond to this. Stan Pollock, CPA, you could be right. This is not completely wrong. What Stan Pollock is suggesting might be true. If you really did derail the Iran nuclear program, and if you really could change the nature of Iranian leadership to the point that they would engage, that they look around, they see no more relevant Hezbollah, no more relevant Houthi connection, no one home in Syria anymore. These are a handful of their proxies that aren't there. They look around and they go, the Americans are strong, the Israelis are now strong enough because we've been diminished militarily. It's time to play a different game. And that game is to not underwrite terrorism, not be jihadist, literally, when it comes to the destruction of Israel and the elimination of Jews everywhere. If you really think that they can reconstitute themselves as a result of this bold act that resets their program, and again, you don't know that it's reset. You're just taking the word of a president who wants to claim victory. But if it really were reset, it is possible then, if those other things fell into place, that this might be a net positive. I will give you that, Stan Pollock. I think so many things have to fall into place for it to be a net positive that it concerns me that we would just claim it as a net positive. Resetting their program, the Iran nuclear program, and again, don't know that we've actually done it, but just saying if it were to be reset, it can be reconstituted in a handful of years. And it will be reconstituted in a way that will definitely protect it from any kind of mission of the sort we saw over the weekend. So when you talk about what's happening, as I always say, it depends when you walked into the movie. If you just walked into the movie now and you said, look, this guy sent these courageous fighters over and they destroyed all of this nuclear enrichment program, the centrifuge is destroyed, all of it's destroyed because of the magical US of A and their weapons. Okay, but 18 months from now and 2 years from now, what does the movie look like? Are there going to be repercussions from this that affect the kind of one-off terrorism that we've talked about, the sleeper cell terrorism, the potential of messing with the Strait of Hormuz, the effect on the world economy because of that? Will Iran and China and Russia grow closer? I mean, There's a reason Putin didn't get involved in don't do this or whatever it might be. I mean, he could have called his pal Donald Trump and says, I think it's a bad idea for you to have anything to do with this situation in the Middle East or to mess with Iran. He has an interest in America being distracted with that. The more America is involved in Iran, the less America is involved in anything with Ukraine. I just think there are a lot of areas of connective tissue here. And I don't mean, Stan Pollock, and I really appreciate you throwing in, I don't mean to neglect the possible narratives that could be positive. But I do mean to say at this instant, I think it's hard to say whether it's a positive. And it's clearly destabilizing. So you could say, well, Iran's destabilizing all the time. They undermine a constant destabilizing from Houthi rebels in Yemen and other proxies. I mean, I can't argue with that. That's true. But it was an incredibly bold act that I'd suggest might be immensely destabilizing to the region. But you may see, and this is the last thing I'll say on this, you may see a new vision for the region where you had the Saudis and you had the Qataris and you had the UAE, etc., somehow warming to the notion that America, with its commerce, Trump with his resorts, his view toward bringing more and more commerce and money and business opportunities to this world, normalizing, if you will, a lot of the Middle East into America and the West. You may see that as something that is now being given an even broader landscape to grow because this one big bad wolf of Iran has been so hobbled. That may be. I'd say one last thing. It would mean more if there were a place for Palestinians to reside in the Middle East safely and with a self-determinative aspect to your politics that you'd find there. Now, that's a part of another conversation. All I'm trying to say is there's a lot of connective tissue here. So I think that conversation still has to continue.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.